Can creativity be reverse engineered? It's an interesting question because if it was possible, you could take something like Iron Man, it's made billions of dollars at the box office, and then reverse engineer it, figure out what made it tick, so you can make the next Iron Man. Well, it might surprise you to learn that actually Iron Man itself was a product of reverse engineering. After DC Comics was finding success with Batman, uh, Iron Man was Marvel Comics' response. They wanted their own billionaire vigilante orphan. I'm serious. Iron Man is essentially West Coast Batman. And then it's not the only one. Like Batman itself was actually inspired by Zorro, which was, the Mexican version of Batman. And, it goes back further. Scarlet Pimpernel was the French Batman, or actually, I guess we should say that Batman is the American Scarlet Pimpernel, right? We can't trace it back any further than this. Most artists don't like to tell you where they get their inspiration, and we don't know if Baroness Orsi got the story from somewhere else or if it was inspired by true events. But the rest is kind of lost to time, and therefore, when we look at new movies like Puss in Boots, should we really be seeing these things as unoriginal? Maybe it's just that we're unaware of the sources of things that we think are original, like Batman or Iron Man or even Zorro. And maybe in the future, our kids will think that Puss in Boots was the original, right? It's interesting to think about. And this isn't the only phenomenon. Of obviously, Avatar, has made billions at the box office, but of course, predictably, it was lifted from another movie. It was from Dances with Wolves. That's what James Cameron said his inspiration was. If you think about it, they're both about plundering colonists who go native and defect to the other side. Another movie which is very similar, a lot of people say almost too similar to Avatar, is Fern Gully. This one's based in a rainforest, but again, same thing. It's about a colonist that kind of comes in, tries to plunder the natural resources, and then has a change of heart and defects to the other side. Obviously, the original, or at least what we think the original is Pocahontas. That was inspired by true events, although the Disney movie is very different from what happened in real life. But again, the story is the same. This is white guilt, right? We come in, we try and extract natural resources, and then we have a change of heart, realize that we've done something wrong, and we, should maybe join the other side and help them fight the bad guys, right? Strange World is the latest in the long line of these movies, right? And again, this is Disney. Disney knows what works, and they have made another movie about people who go into a kind of alien land or foreign land, and then they're looking for natural resources, and then eventually kind of decide to stop what they're doing and help out the natives. Each of these movies is very different, right? Like some of them are relatively similar, right? Like Avatar looks visually very similar to Fenguli, and things have changed, but also the template remains the same. Star Wars, you're probably asking, Star Wars surely is an original. Star Wars itself has been copied millions of times by plenty of movies. It was really inspirational to a lot of film directors and audience goers. But of course, Star Wars was a complete copy. They actually lifted a lot of scenes from samurai movies, and old westerns almost directly. But the main inspiration was Flash Gordon. George Lucas applied for a license to make Flash Gordon and was denied, and that's why he made Star Wars. This was his version of it. In both of these movies, there's the chosen one. They have supernatural powers, and then they rebel against a huge kind of evil empire. Chosen one probably ranks some bells. The Matrix is another example of this template, right? Like Neo is the chosen one. He has all these supernatural powers. Actually, in all of these movies, there was some sort of mysterious stranger that comes and helps the chosen one like discover their powers. Morpheus in the Matrix. And we, these are not original. Like one of the stories we can trace it back to is Homer's The Odyssey, which again is about a chosen one who rebels against the status quo, using their supernatural powers. So Harry Potter was an incredibly successful film series, but copied this template, right? Harry Potter is basically Luke Skywalker, but with a crappy version of the lightsaber, right? Like using a wand instead. Not as cool, but obviously still very successful. And all of these movies fit a template, and this template is maybe the most popular story template ever used. All of them start with a young male protagonist. They meet a mysterious stranger. They enter the supernatural world. They make friends and enemies. They suffer challenges and face temptations. There's usually unrequited love, like they fall in love with someone they're not supposed to, or someone who doesn't like them back. And then they face impossible odds, but eventually defeat the bad guy and save the world and get the girl. And this template is called The Hero's Journey. It's from Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces. And it comes up everywhere from the Lion King to Lord of the Rings to really any kind of successful popular blockbuster you can think of. It's not the only template. Actually, Kurt Vonnegut, a famous writer, wrote his master's thesis about the shapes of stories. So what he did is he actually kind of plotted out the highs and low points of many, many different stories, and found that there are really kind of 8 basic templates. This is just one of them. So this is common to both like the New Testament and the story of Cinderella, and starts with incremental giving of gifts by deities. Right? In the New Testament, it's the 7 days of creation. In Cinderella's help from the fairy godmother. And then there's a real downer where humans commit original sin, get cast out of Eden, and then in Cinderella, that point is when the magic wears off at midnight. But then things start to look up. Jesus helps us forgive original sin in the New Testament. The glass slipper fits in Cinderella, and then eventually kind of happiness gets up and goes to infinity, and it's happily ever after. So why should we care about this? Well, like Kurt Vonnegut says, every time this story is retold, it makes someone $1 million, and you're welcome to it. Like if you know this template, you can make your story based off it, right? You can increase your odds of success. And why did these stories keep showing up again and again? Like, why have they stayed with us for so many years? I think it's really because they tell us non-obvious truths that we wouldn't otherwise know ourselves. So normally, our expectation is that when someone's evil, they tend to be very strong and powerful, right? Like that's pretty normal. And I think we need myths because we need a story to tell us or remind us constantly that actually sometimes someone could be good and strong, right? Like, they might not spend all their time, working out in the gym so they can fight the other guy, right? Like, maybe they're not just like building up a weapon stockpile all the time, like the evil, powerful people are doing, but they have inner strength, and it's good to be reminded of that sometimes, so that the good guys can, face up against the odds. One thing that's really interesting, really a good way to understand what's going on here is kind of understanding why the same inventions come up again and again. So obviously we talked about stories, but one thing that is often shared on conspiracy sites is like, why did everyone build pyramids back in the day? Well, they showed up in Mexico, in Egypt, in Indonesia, and this is where people say maybe it must have been like ancient aliens, right? That came down and showed all these different people how to build pyramids. They didn't know how to do it, like they weren't in contact with each other. Well, I mean, there's one thing you'll notice if you have kids like I do, is that when you're stacking blocks, you don't have modern construction equipment, then the best way to stack blocks is in a pyramid, right? Like that's the strongest shape. In some cases, this shape was copied, right? Once you build one pyramid in Egypt, you want to build multiple because you realize this works and it looks super impressive. But then, in some cases, it was independently arrived at. like in Indonesia or Mexico. And this is something that comes up again and again with ideas. Our best ideas quite often, get remembered over time because they're useful. They get copied because they're useful, but sometimes we just arrive at them because they work and they're helpful to us, even if we don't see them or don't copy them from somewhere else. And that's important because we haven't really changed since those times. Like our brains are still basically the same as they were back then. Evolution happens over millions and millions of years. So if you brought a caveman to today, to our modern world, like they would basically be indistinguishable once they had a shower, right? They would probably have their mind blown by a technology, but if you raise them from birth, they would grow up fairly normal. So it's really not our brains or our DNA that makes the big difference for us. The only real difference in our wealth, as a society is our nurture, right? Not our nature. Our nature has a big impact on our personality, and obviously it's the hardware that we operate on, but our software is really what's important. So what's in our brains? Like, what do we remember? If we didn't know, if we collectively forgot how to, make spears and brew beer and build arches, make sliced bread, then we would just be poorer for it, right? Like we would still be the same biologically, but our society would be much less rich, and people would be in much worse poverty, right? So these things, like, what do we call them? These ideas that stay in the brain that evolve over time. Well, Richard Dawkins calls them memes. And it could be any idea, right? Like it could be songs, right? Tunes. We catchphrases like from a marketing campaign, different fashions, ways of making pots, building arches, whatever it is. They evolve in much the same way that our DNA evolves, but it just happens a lot faster. And once you understand that, you can start to look for these memes in our stories, in our creative works, in our inventions. We start to see what things are staying the same over time, what things keep getting reinvented because they're useful. And if we know that, then we can spot the patterns. And once we can spot patterns, then we can reverse engineer creativity. So I think it can be reverse engineered. I've written a book on the topic called Marketing Memetics, and it's written specifically for marketers who want to dig deep into this topic and learn how to do it, like learn how to find these patterns and then use them in your marketing campaigns to make sure that you have a higher chance of success.